The Articles of Confederation were not working, and the young United States was in trouble. The economy was in a deep depression because the currency printed by the Articles of Confederation government was effectively worthless. Great Britain, although it had promised to respect the U.S. as a nation, kept troops stationed along the Mississippi River and armed Native Americans along the western frontier. Making matters even worse, the independent United States no longer enjoyed the protection of the British Navy, meaning their trade ships in the Mediterranean were prime targets for Barbary pirates from North Africa. It was becoming plain that the present government was not strong enough to face these challenges, so a convention was called in Philadelphia to fix the flawed Articles of Confederation. 55 delegates came from every state except Rhode Island, which refused to participate because it disliked the idea of a strong federal government. The delegates were all male, all white, and pretty much all lawyers, not exactly a cross-section of American diversity. Travel delays forced the convention's start date from May 14, 1787 to May 25th. George Washington was unanimously elected the chairman of the proceedings, but a more important figure was James Madison. It was Madison who led the charge for a central government stronger than any state government. He also pushed for separation of powers, that is, dividing the duties of the government among separate branches. These new ideas were so radically different from the existing system, it was clear that the old Articles of Confederation were not going to be revised, but thrown out entirely and replaced. Once the opportunity arose to create an entirely new government, however, it opened the door to a world of controversies. The one that caused the most problems was the issue of how states should be represented in the legislature. Right away, a plan was offered by delegates from large states. Named the Virginia Plan, it called for representation to be based solely on population. That is to say, the number of votes a state got in each of the two proposed houses was based directly on the number of people living in that state. Smaller states, worried that their voices would be drowned out in the system, quickly responded with the New Jersey Plan, which called for only one house and equal representation for each state regardless of size. By now, it was June 11th, and the convention had ground to a halt. Luckily, a proposal was put forward called the Great Compromise. It called for states to be represented equally in one house, the Senate, and to be represented by population in another, the House of Representatives. Everyone agreed, and the negotiations could move forward. From here on out, there were only two more major sticking points that history cares about. The first involved representation in the House of Representatives. Many southern states had just as many slaves as freemen, and in the interest of increasing the representation, the South wanted slaves to be counted as part of the population even though they couldn't vote. Northern states naturally objected. The compromise they reached is perhaps one of the most notorious in American history. Known as the 3/5 Compromise, it stipulated that a slave would count as 3/5 of a person. The South also agreed to stop importing slaves within 20 years. The only issue left involved the executive branch. Although the delegates were afraid of creating a king, they also wanted a strong central leader. The president they created did have a lot of power, but he wasn't elected directly by the people. See, the framers didn't actually trust the so-called mob to make the best decision. Instead, they created the Electoral College, a representative body that would actually cast the votes. With the details ironed out, the problem now is getting the states to agree and making the Constitution the law of the land, but that is a story of its own.